They called her the Vance girl with the mark. In the bitter winter of 1883, in a corner of Wyoming so cold and forgotten even the wolves hesitated, Eliza Vance's life changed forever. Her father, a man whose soul had long been sold to whiskey and gambling, didn't just marry off his daughter. He traded her like a commodity to a man everyone in Bitter Creek whispered about, a man more beast than human. The townsfolk had no doubt that Eliza would die in the mountains within a week. They were wrong. What they didn't know was that legends are born from the unlikeliest of places and the unlikeliest of people. Eliza was 24. In the eyes of the frontier, that meant spinster, unwanted, and unfit. But it wasn't her age that kept suitors away. It was the mark, a jagged, angry burn scar that began at her left ear and trailed down her neck, a relic of a childhood accident with a kerosene lamp. In a world that measured women by beauty and charm, she was considered broken. Her father, Jebediah Vance, didn't see a daughter, he saw currency. Her sister, Sarah, pale-skinned and perfect in every way, was his pride. Eliza was the backroom worker, the girl hidden from company, the girl who chopped wood, kneaded dough, and hid her face behind her hair. The mountain man came on a Tuesday. Silas Kincaid didn't just enter the saloon, he seemed to consume the space around him. He was a giant, wrapped in buffalo hides, smelling of pine resin and blood. His beard was a wild thicket, black and gray, and stories of his savagery clung to him like a shadow. He had killed men barehanded, eaten raw meat, and spoken to wolves. Twice a year he came down from the high peaks for supplies, and townsfolk crossed the street to avoid him. Silas slammed a heavy leather pouch onto the bar. Gold dust spilled the weight of his intent. Jebediah's eyes, wide with desperation, locked on it. Debt collectors circled like snakes, and in that moment madness crept into a father's mind. "You need a woman up there, Kincaid," he slurred, voice shaking. "Strong, good cook, can skin a buck faster than you." Silas's eyes, cold as the mountain ice, didn't move. He simply watched. "I have a daughter," Jebediah continued, voice trembling. "Eliza, the oldest." Laughter rippled through the saloon. Old Pete, the bartender, muttered under his breath, "He's selling off the scarred one. Don't let him fool you." Silas said nothing. He only reached into his coat, produced a second pouch, and dropped it on the counter. "Pack her things," he said. "I leave in the hour." Jebediah took the gold without hesitation. He didn't see the daughter he condemned. He saw survival. At the farmhouse, Eliza scrubbed the floors, oblivious to her fate. Her father told her to pack, spoke of luck, of being chosen, and didn't look her in the eye. Sarah wept quietly in the corner. Eliza said nothing. She had learned long ago that life didn't care about screams or pleas. Her bag was small, 2 dresses, a Bible, a knife, and a locket with her mother's face. When she stepped onto the porch, Silas waited on a massive horse. He didn't help her. He extended a hand, enormous, calloused, strong, and she took it. He swung her behind him on the saddle. "Hold on," he grunted. As they left Bitter Creek, the townsfolk watched. No waves, no goodbyes, just silent eyes following the girl sold like cattle. Eliza's heart hammered, not from cold, but from the certainty that she was riding toward a death the town had expected. The trail was brutal. Goat paths twisted through the mountains, snow drifted over the horse's belly, and the air cut her lungs with ice. For hours, silence was their companion. She clutched him, keeping distance where she could, feeling his heat through layers of buffalo hide. His alertness was constant, scanning every tree, every ridge, every shadow. At night they stopped on a plateau. Stars sharp enough to cut glass blanketed the sky. Silas dismounted, lifted her to the ground, and began a fire. The horse was tended. Then, wordlessly, he draped his heavy buffalo robe over her shoulders. The warmth was instant, like the first fire after a century of cold. "Sit," he commanded. She obeyed. He cooked strips of venison over the flames, seasoned with wild herbs she didn't recognize. When he handed her the meat, she lied. "I'm not hungry." "Starving won't make you pretty, and it won't make you strong. Eat. You'll need strength for tomorrow." Her scar burned under her hair. She lowered her head, hiding it, but he had already seen. "Where do you sleep?" she asked. "I sleep by the fire. You sleep against the wall. I don't touch what hasn't been offered," he said. He rolled into his blanket. She watched, knife clutched in hand, heart hammering. She didn't sleep. She couldn't. The wind rattled the plateau. Her life had become a sequence of instructions: obey, survive, endure. The next day the mountains tested her. Snow rose above the horse's belly. Cold carved into her bones. Hours later, through spruce forests, they reached a clearing. There stood a cabin, sturdy logs, stone chimney, lean-to and stable. "Home," Sila said, grunting. Inside, the order stunned her. Furs on the floor, tools on walls, shelves stacked with preserved jars. Clean, warm, safe. "This is your domain now," he said. "I hunt, I chop wood. You keep the fire, cook, mend." He left. Alone, she understood. She was a prisoner, yet she had more freedom than ever before. She explored the cabin and discovered a rocking chair, freshly carved, adorned with wildflowers. She sat. For the first time in 24 years, she wondered if monsters might have hearts. Night fell. Sila's returned with a skinned rabbit. He noticed her seat but said nothing. Just set it down, moved to prepare supper. "Wood has a soul," he muttered. "Just carve away the rough parts to find it." Eliza touched her scar. "Carve away the rough parts." That night she slept in the bed, he in the loft. She didn't pray for rescue. She prayed for understanding. The wind screamed, snow piled high. But for the first time she felt warmth beyond fire. She was alive. Winter stretched on. Days passed in silence. She cooked, mended, swept. He hunted, whittled, and taught her survival. Slowly the ice between them thawed. He taught her to read the clouds, to track animals, to handle rifles. One evening he read aloud the Count of Monte Cristo while she sewed. Christmas came. He gave her a comb carved from antler, polished smooth. "For your hair," he said, "too fine to tie in rags." Tears filled her eyes. She had nothing to give him. He said simply, "You make this place warm. A fire is just heat. A home, you gave me that." The blizzard roared. He called her up to the loft, not to touch her but to share warmth. Slowly, instinctively, she pressed against him in sleep, not held but anchored. They healed together in the high, thin air. Two broken souls learning trust, patience, and something more. By spring, snow melted. The mountains revealed green valleys. And then the past came riding toward her. Billy Cormarmac, a nervous deputy with news that tore open old wounds. Her sister Sarah, sold to pay off debts, was trapped in the Gilded Lily saloon. Eliza's blood ran cold. Sila's didn't hesitate. He sharpened his Bowie knife, packed their gear, and said, "We leave at first light. You are my wife in the eyes of God and the mountain. I don't let men like Ashford take what is mine." For the first time, Eliza didn't feel fear. She felt fire, the fire of belonging, of being seen, of being loved by a man who had been called beast but who had become her protector, her teacher, her home. Her father had sold her. The town had scorned her. But in the mountains, she discovered something they could never take: love that burned hotter than any fire, stronger than any storm, and deeper than any scar. The first light of April pierced the misty peaks. Eliza's heart thumped with a mixture of fear and determination. Sila's had been awake since before dawn, checking trap lines and readying their gear. The snow had melted enough to reveal a rough trail down the mountainside, but it was still treacherous. "Stay close," Sila's growled, mounting his horse. "The men in Bitter Creek won't expect us this high, but expect them to be armed and ready for anything." Eliza nodded, clutching her rifle like a lifeline. She had learned from Sila's to trust the weight of steel in her hands. It had saved her once, and she knew it could save her again. They descended into the valley, the air growing warmer, the snow giving way to mud and early spring blooms. Every ridge they crossed, every bend in the trail, carried whispers of the town below. Bitter Creek had never been kind, but now it was dangerous. By mid-morning, the silhouette of the town appeared through the haze. The Gilded Lily Saloon loomed like a den of wolves. Its windows were dark, the sounds inside muffled, but Eliza didn't need to see to know her sister was there. She could feel it in her bones. Silas dismounted in a copse of trees just outside the town's perimeter. "We don't rush in," he said. "We observe. You tell me what you see. You tell me if it's safe." Eliza crouched behind him, eyes scanning the saloon. A pair of men stood by the entrance, guns casually slung at their sides. Inside, through the grimy windows, she could make out shapes, women moving, tending to glasses, forced smiles hiding fear. "That's Sarah," Eliza whispered, spotting her sister kneeling near a table, serving drinks to minors. Her shoulders were slumped, but her eyes, though tired, lit up for a fraction of a second when she saw a familiar face outside the window. Silas's hand was on her shoulder. "We'll wait for the right moment. You don't run blindly, you survive." Hours passed like this, the tension thick as mud. Eliza had never felt more alive, yet more terrified. She had spent months in the mountains learning to trust Silas, learning to rely on instincts she didn't know she had. Now those lessons were about to be tested. Finally, the right moment came. Two of the guards left to speak with a patron outside. Silas motioned her forward. "Now." They slipped through the shadows, the noise of the town swallowed by distance and the hum of spring insects. Silas was a shadow himself, moving with a precision that made him almost invisible. Eliza followed, her heart racing, her breath shallow. At the side door of the Gilded Lily, Silas produced a set of tools from his pack. Within minutes, the lock gave way. They slipped inside. The saloon smelled of smoke, whiskey, and sweat. It reeked of desperation. Eliza's eyes immediately found Sarah. She was kneeling on the floor, her hands tied loosely in front, forced into submission by fear. "Sarah," Eliza breathed. Her sister looked up, eyes wide, disbelief and relief colliding. "Eliza, is that you?" Silas moved silently behind the counter, watching the front doors. "We have minutes, not hours. Untie her slowly. No sudden moves." Eliza knelt beside her sister, hands trembling as she worked on the knots. The leather bindings were stiff, but months of practice had made her nimble. Finally, Sarah's hands were free. "Come on," Eliza whispered. "We have to move." They crept toward the back exit, Silas clearing the path with a stealth that seemed supernatural. Just as they reached the door, a harsh voice barked behind them. "Hey, what's going on back there?" Two men had entered, unaware of the shadows creeping around them. Silas didn't hesitate. In a blur, he disarmed one, slamming him into the wall. Eliza felt her pulse spike, but she mirrored his movements, raising her rifle and taking aim at the second man. He froze, and she didn't hesitate. A single warning shot cracked the air, sending him stumbling backward. "Move," Silas ordered. They bolted out the back, Sarah clutching her sister's hand like a lifeline. The night air was a welcome relief after the stench of the saloon. They mounted their horses and plunged into the hills, every heartbeat a drum of fear and exhilaration. As they climbed higher, the town disappeared behind them, swallowed by trees and mist. For the first time in months, Sarah was safe, her sobs muffled against Eliza's shoulder. You saved me," Sarah whispered, voice trembling. Eliza shook her head. "We saved each other. Silas, he won't let anyone take what's ours." Silas rode a little ahead, scanning the horizon. When he looked back, his eyes met Eliza's. In that glance, there was no anger, no desire to command, only pride, only love. She felt a strange warmth, a recognition that he had always been protecting her, not just from the town, but from herself, from the fear that had always chained her. That night they camped at the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley. Fire crackled, stars piercing the darkness. Silas tended the horses, while Eliza and Sarah huddled near the flames. "You were so brave," Eliza said softly, watching her sister. "I had to be," Sarah replied, tears still glistening. "But I would have been lost if you hadn't come." Eliza glanced at Silas, who had turned his back to the fire, sharpening his knives. He didn't need praise. He never sought it. But in the way he moved, in the quiet confidence that radiated from him, she understood he had done this for her because she was his, because she belonged to him in a way that transcended fear or obligation. The weeks that followed were a blur of motion. They returned to the mountains, Sarah recovering her strength, learning the ways of the wild under Silas's watchful eye. He taught her how to survive, how to track, how to fire a rifle. But more than that, he taught her the unspoken language of trust. For Eliza, the mountain air became a balm. The scar on her neck, once a source of shame, felt less like a brand and more like a mark of survival. Silas never looked at her with pity or disgust. He looked at her with understanding. He looked at her as a partner. A woman who could endure and conquer. A woman who had faced death and come back stronger. One evening, as the sun bled red over the peaks, Silas and Eliza sat on a fallen log, watching Sarah tend to the garden patch they had cleared. Silas finally spoke, his voice softer than she had ever heard. "You've changed," he said. "I had to," she replied. "No," he corrected gently. "You were always strong, you just didn't know it. The mountain didn't make you strong, you already were." Her heart skipped. She looked at him, really looked. The scars on his hands, the harsh lines of his face, the steel in his eyes, and she realized that the man who had been called a beast by the town was capable of more love, more loyalty, more protection than anyone she had ever known. Days turned to weeks. The snow melted entirely, rivers swelled, and the high peaks bloomed with life. The three of them became a family, bound not by blood, but by choice, by survival, by the silent vow that no one would ever harm them again. And in the quiet moments when the fire crackled and the wind whispered through the pines, Silas would glance at Eliza, and she would feel it, the unspoken truth that she had been sold by her father, judged by the town, and feared by the world. And yet here, in the heart of the mountains, she was loved like no other. Because he had seen her, truly seen her, and he had chosen her. By mid-May, the mountains had shed the last of the winter's snow. The rivers roared with thawwater, and the pines released their fresh, resinous scent into the air. Life had returned to the peaks, but tranquility was deceptive. Bitter Creek had not forgotten the woman Silas had taken, or the debt left unpaid. Eliza watched Sarah tend the small garden patch they had cleared. Spring flowers poked through the soil, and Silas's careful irrigation of the spring-fed stream ensured a bounty of fresh greens. But even amidst the renewal, a shadow lingered. "I don't like it," Sarah murmured, glancing up at the peaks. "The town, they'll come for us. Ashford isn't the type to forgive." Eliza's hand stilled in the soil. "Then we'll be ready," she said, trying to keep her voice calm, though her heart thudded with anxiety. Silas appeared, returning from a scouting trip along the far ridge. His massive frame moved like a panther in the tall grass. "You heard them," he said, voice low, gravelly with warning. "They're organizing, guns, men, and anger." Eliza rose, wiping dirt from her hands. She felt a familiar adrenaline spike, fear mingled with determination. She had faced the worst Bitter Creek had to offer once, and now, with Silas by her side, she felt ready to face it again. The first sign of trouble came with a rider descending the valley below. A lone scout, his approach confident but cautious. Silas squinted. "Billy Cormorack," he muttered. The young deputy, looking nervous and out of place, was the harbinger of the storm to come. Eliza gripped her rifle, stepping closer to Silas. "What does he want?" "Information," Silas said, scanning the horizon, "and he'll give it to the highest bidder." Billy's horse slowed near the edge of the forest. He raised a hand in peace, though Eliza noticed the tension in his shoulders. Silas stepped forward, his presence imposing, the sheer size of him enough to make the young deputy hesitate. "Miss Eliza," Billy said, his voice wavering, "it's Ashford. He's gathering every able man in town. They're coming for you, for your sister, for him," he nodded toward Silas. They won't stop until you're back in their control. Eliza's chest tightened. The memory of Sarah in the saloon, helpless, terrified, surged in her mind. Then we stop them, she said, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. Silas placed a hand on her shoulder, his rough fingers warm and grounding. We don't just fight for ourselves, he said. We fight for what's ours, for family, for life, and for freedom. Over the next 2 days they prepared. Silas taught Sarah to shoot with precision, to move silently through the underbrush. Eliza and Silas reinforced the cabin, setting traps along the mountain trails. Every rock, every tree became a weapon, a shield. They were no longer just a family, they were a fortress. By the third night, the sounds of the approaching men reached them. Ashford's posse, rough and cruel, had come with vengeance in their eyes. The first shots rang out as they attempted to scale the slopes toward the cabin. Silas moved like a shadow, taking down the nearest attackers with lethal efficiency. Eliza fired from the loft, her aim steady, the rifle an extension of her arm. Each shot struck true, each man fell leaving a mark of defiance against the tyranny of Bitter Creek. Sarah, though younger and less experienced, proved herself invaluable. She flanked the intruders, driving them toward Silas's traps. The wolves they had befriended and fed all winter now howled in the distance, circling the valley, a haunting accompaniment to the battle. The fight raged until dawn, the forest littered with the remnants of Ashford's ill-fated assault. Exhausted but unbroken, Eliza and Silas stood together, bloodied but victorious. Silas turned to her, eyes dark, intense, yet soft with something she had not dared to hope for, pride and perhaps love. He reached for her hand. "You are fierce," he said simply. "I've never seen a woman fight like you. Not in the mountains, not in the town. You're mine, Eliza, and I'll never let anyone take you." Her throat tightened, tears stinging her eyes. "I belong to no one," she whispered. "You belong to me," he replied, his hand covering hers. "And I to you. We were forged together in the cold, in fear, in survival. No one, not your father, not the town, not the world, can ever undo that." For the first time in her life, Eliza allowed herself to be vulnerable. She leaned against him, feeling the strength in his chest, the warmth in his embrace. The mountain, the snow, the fire, all of it had led to this. In the weeks that followed, they rebuilt. Bitter Creek remained a threat, but the mountains were their sanctuary. Silas and Eliza's bond deepened with each passing day, no longer just necessity or survival, but love, fierce, unyielding, and absolute. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, painting the sky in blood red and gold, Silas and Eliza sat side by side on the rocks overlooking the valley. Sarah played nearby, laughter carrying over the ridge. Silas took Eliza's hand in his, pressing a kiss to her scar, the mark that had once defined her as broken. "This mark," he murmured, "it's not a flaw, it's proof. Proof of everything you've endured, of everything we've endured, and I love it, I love you." Eliza's breath caught. She had never heard words like that, not from a father, not from a lover, not from anyone. But Silas, the man who had been called a monster, had seen her, truly seen her, and loved every jagged, fierce part of her. She leaned forward, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was no longer tentative, no longer fearful. It was a claim, a promise, a declaration. The mountains echoed their union, the wind whispering their names, the stars witnessing their bond. From that day forward, the Vance girl with the mark was no longer defined by shame or fear. She was defined by love, by strength, by the man who had chosen her, a mountain man who had turned a life of suffering into a life of legend. And Silas, he had found not a wife to serve, not a prize to possess, but a partner, fierce and unyielding, whose fire matched his own. Together, they carved a home from the wilderness, a life from the shadows of the past, and a love that no winter, no town, no betrayal could ever break. The mountains remembered them, the wind carried their story, and in every log, every fire, every carved flower on a rocking chair, the proof remained. that even in the harshest winters, even when life seems cruel and unyielding, love, true, fearless love, could bloom where no one believed it would. Eliza Vance, once sold like cattle, now ruled the peaks with Sela's at her side. Together they were unstoppable. Together they were home.